Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
And here we are on Monday night. This is Jody Burkeen, your host for the Man Up Monday podcast. I'm also the founder of Man Up God's Way Men's Ministry, a ministry designed and birthed out of a desire to see men actually do Christianity. Stop sitting in the proverbial back row of the church, rise up and become leaders in their home, spiritual leaders in their home, loving their wife like Christ loved the church, leading their children in the way so they will not depart from the faith, and to serve their church. And then as they do that, man, we want you to reach out and make disciples. That's what Christianity is all about. And so really excited to be here tonight. I got a special guest that we'll introduce here in just a minute. But for those of you who are joining us, we are now live on our app, and we're hoping you guys will join us from the app. We've got quite a few people that are in the app now. We just launched this a couple weeks ago, and we're really excited about it. So in the app now, we just launched this a couple weeks ago. We're going to play it double there. Sorry about that. We're live on the app as well as live on Zoom. So, but we're really excited about the new app that we have, and all the things that are going on with it. We already have 300 downloads, men joining this app, which is a good community app. It's a place to where you can be safe. It's a place to where you can go and not have the craziness of social media. And in the very, very near future, within a week or two, we're going to start having Bible studies, live Bible studies that will be on there. We will have curriculum set up for you to be able to take some men through the Bible. We're going to start off with 12 doctrines of the Bible and work our way through that, and give you a good foundation to become the men that God has called you to be. Also, if you get an opportunity, go and check out our merch store, manupmerch.com, where we have all kinds of goodies. We've got coffee, one of my favorite coffees in the whole wide world. I've got coffee mugs. I've got water bottles. I have our books. The very first book I wrote, Man Up, Becoming a Godly Man in an Ungodly World. If you get an opportunity to read that, it is it's a throat punch is what I call it. And it will get you off the seat of not doing anything and challenge you to do something when it comes to your faith. And so, Rusty, glad you're here, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Awesome. Good week?
It's been a good week, yes.
Okay, good. I should say weekend since it's Monday.
It is, yeah, it is Monday. No, it was a good weekend. So been finally recovering and recouping from sinus stuff, but awesome. I've still got a surgery coming up for that in here the next 3 weeks, but otherwise I'm doing a lot better now.
Good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Well, we'll be praying for you over your surgery.
Yep.
And we'll get you some Midol too.
Yeah, make sure may need it when it's over.
Exactly. Well, a lot of craziness has been happening over the weekend, and last week we've had just the Supreme Court has been on fire. Biblically, morally, it just seems like things that I even confessed to my church yesterday. 2 or 3 weeks ago when the leak came out that the Supreme Court was thinking about overturning Roe versus Wade, I wasn't real sure that would happen. I thought it was just propaganda. And, for years, I've just kind of thought, man, we're hopeless. Once something typically gets in the government and is law, it usually doesn't change very easy.
Very easily. It's one of those things. Yeah. I remember when I first heard about it, I was just like, oh, wow, that actually happened in my lifetime. Right. Just one of those things where you don't expect.
Right, exactly. Well, not only it happened in my lifetime when they actually had Roe versus Wade, and then, I was only 3 years old, but 50 years later, we're able to say that, at the federal level, at least, now we can say that it is unconstitutional. the great thing about it now is now the church needs to step up and do something. They actually have to get out and take care of the single moms. They have to get out and take care of the foster kids. They have to get out and adopt and get rid of the system that we have in place, so we can support those who are, hell-bent on trying to have a baby and kill it. Yep. And we've got to do something different and give them hope outside of that. Once you kill the baby, there's no hope at all. True. But we've got to give them hope. So really excited about that. They also today just passed a ruling that it is constitutional that you can pray at a sporting event in any high school or college, which is huge.
It's huge, and yet coming from a rural community where it was still practice and it was almost second nature, it seems kind of odd because I heard about that but I was like, wow, that's now it's nobody's going to get in trouble for that, and right. They're actually going to be able to do that, and that was one of the things growing up in a rural community. We always had what they would call prayer zones and things like that, where they put up signs, and they always had a prayer zone. And you kind of grow up in the Bible Belt in the Midwest, right, exactly. And it's so much different. But now hearing that that it's going to be allowed federally, it's really cool to see that that's going to happen.
Amen. Exactly. So great stuff, folks. But we've actually got to go out and do some stuff. We got to go and change some lives and be the light that Christ has called us to be, and be the salt of the earth, and open our doors, whether it's your home, whether it's the church, and let's make a difference. So tonight I'm excited. I have my guest tonight, Jeff Overton. Jeff, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Man, I'm so glad that you joined us. We had some technical difficulties there for a minute, and just some crazy. I hate technology, but I love it at the same time. So I'm not smart enough to use it, but I have to use it. So thank you for joining us. You and I met through a common friend who. Is one of my favorite people, just so you know. I'm not going to throw her name out there, but she's an amazing woman, and I love her to death. And so, Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe your testimony, how you came to know Christ, and how we're talking today, all the way up to there. So,
absolutely. Thanks again for allowing me to join. I think this is an awesome podcast, and like I told you guys earlier, I've seen some folks, including yourself, on here who, you've got authors and you've got people who direct movies, and I'm a guy who shows up to work. That's what I do. So what are we going to talk about? So I'm excited though to share what we're going to be talking about today in regards to corporate faith and things like that, which is
great.
It's pretty exciting. But from my journey, I guess just thinking back, so I grew up in an amazing household. My parents, both married, still married today. Both wonderful parents. Were able to teach me the ropes on different things. We didn't necessarily, hold a religious or a faith-based home, essentially, right. Like a direct, studying the Bible and different things. So some things that I, as I was in my probably late teens, met up with some friends, and it's when you're, in high school, late high school into college, and I'm sort of in this party scene, right? So every weekend is a party, drinking and some drugs, whatever it might be, you do through the weekend. But I had a group of buddies who would, no matter what went on a Saturday night, Sunday, they got up and went to church. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like you can totally sleep in, right. This is the time where we're going to get up and do it again the next day. That's what this is all about. And they just kept doing it, and I just kept getting a drive as to there must be something that's happening there that makes them get up after a late night and be at a church. And so it made me start digging into what that's about, and so started showing up on my own, kind of, through invites, of course, from them. But for me, I'm an analytical person, and I need to kind of see and touch, things. And so God and I, had a lot of conversations. I'm like, hey, if this stuff is real, I need to see it happening. And
Right.
and so I think he humored me in that and said, okay, let's do some things, So through my journey into my early 20s, I finally got to a point where I'm realizing, okay, this stuff is real. I can't use the word coincidence anymore. They tell you to pray about something, you pray about it, your life, changes because of it, and you say, wow, that was a coincidence. That was interesting how that happened. And after
Right.
about 100 times, the coincidence doesn't work anymore. And so drove myself into wanting to know more, and just like a sponge, getting into read the Bible more, getting into Bible studies. And so that's kind of where it all drove me. I had to kind of find that on my own, which I think was an important journey, for me. But when I learned a lot about it, I didn't really have this personality that would say, hey, I want to go out and profess this to everybody. Like I was excited about it, but I didn't feel like I had like the right information in my head. Like I couldn't describe this to people. I knew what I had. So in my head, I'm thinking, what is there that I can do, that I can talk to people about God, but not necessarily be like slamming them upside the head with the Bible, right? And
Right.
saying this is what you should be doing. So for me, it worked through finances. And so my late going into my late 20s, early 30s, I had a lot of jobs that related around finance in the car business, and in mortgage business and things like that. And I started realizing that people were hurting, when it came
Right.
to money, it was difficult. And so I found a way, through various ministries that through faith talk about biblical ministries and money. And so that's where my drive came. So for the last 20 years has been my focus around how can I help people in finances, and wrap that into, a spiritual growth as well.
Man, that is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because you'd be amazed of how many people that, you know, what I see as a pastor a lot of time is that the people who have money don't necessarily need God until they actually have a major problem. And it's a weird dichotomy, because you see these folks that actually have real problems. They don't have financial problems, but they've got real problems. Usually it's marital, or, their children or something like that. But it always seems to be that the most of the people coming to church are those that are the upper middle class to lower middle, to poverty level, that sometimes just don't know how to steward their money as we're supposed to, in and through. Like, that was probably my biggest struggle as a Christian, because money was always my God prior to salvation. And even in through my, the early stages of my salvation, I still I would put my money up on the pedestal, and I'd take God and put him on. And I just kept doing this back and forth, and finally, God just took it all away. And then I didn't have anything but to focus on God. So it's really cool that you've found a niche to where that you can not only use your expertise, but add the biblical model behind it. And as we're called to be fishers of men. It's kind of that adage of, you're throwing the bait out there, and then you're bringing them in. It's not like you walk up with a shotgun and shoot them. We're not hunting for men. You shoot them, drag them into the church. You're slowly but surely just giving them, some things that are going to help, plus the potential for salvation in and through Jesus Christ, or reconciliation, depending on where they are. So that's really cool that you're doing that.
Yeah, I think it's, I've always looked at it when I was kind of going through this whole journey, and for a while it took me a little bit to understand that the checkbook and the Bible, I just consider those two separate things, right? Like, I could do my checkbook, I'll figure this part out. The Bible's for the spiritual side. But going through and seeing these, that there's, more than 2,500, verses that relate directly to some sort of a financial aspect. It's literally a guide. I mean, it's
Yeah.
literally in writing of how to do things,
Yeah, it is.
it's there. So
Yeah.
that's an easy, when you get people who are in desperate situations and there's a program that you can get them into and say, hey, let's talk about your money. That's where it's at. Maybe your marriage is on the brink, but maybe it's not necessarily about what you think it's about. Maybe it's about communication with each other around the finances. Maybe it's something that you don't realize how to talk to the other person. And so by doing that and then relating that to verses that are, in the Bible, it's a pretty easy transition when people are in that situation to say, I just need some help.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
That's really good.
I like how you do that, because unfortunately, money is taboo in the church. The moment that you say something about it, people are like, "Oh, I give with a grateful heart," and half of them don't give, and yet they still have financial problems, or they're always playing the adage of, "Let me get everything taken care of, and then I'll give to the church. Then I'll give to God." And a lot of times that's backwards. I always have people, should I tithe off the gross or should I tithe off the net? And I'm always like, well, do you want a gross blessing or a net blessing?
Right. And if you're even getting close to that, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Either one, pick it for now. Let's get you started.
Tithe, yeah. If you're tithing, that's great. So, it's really good to see that, somebody is, there's a lot of people out there, but, they're doing it for financial gain a lot of times. You're doing it through what sounds like discipleship. And man, that you'll be blessed for that. And I appreciate you doing that. So how are you going about, like, what would be, for an example, let's say I called you and I said, hey, Jeff, I'm struggling with finances, and man, I just, I don't know why God keeps putting me in these positions. How would you start a conversation, or maybe even a discipleship process or a mentoring process to come alongside of me?
Yeah, the first thing that has been helpful for me is trying to get on the same page. The lingo, the understanding of where we're at. And there is a program out there that I found extremely helpful because it's so simple. And it's a discipleship program. You've probably heard of Dave Ramsey, right? And so Ramsey Solutions, that it's an extremely inexpensive program, but it's got all the materials. And so if a lot of times people come to you, what I've been trying to do, and our church is big on trying to get ahead of the situations where it's a drastic situation, right? Because most people try to, they don't feel like, for whatever reason, maybe it's an embarrassment, maybe it's, I just don't feel like I should be bringing this to other people's attention. Maybe it's the church. Everybody seems like they're doing well. How come I'm not? Where really everybody around is struggling in some way.
Right.
But to start that conversation before it gets to the point of, okay, now I have no money left and I need to go to the shelter to get food, things like that. And so what we try to do is we try to promote this so that it's in advance, right?
Right.
If we have young married couples, the first thing we want to encourage them to do, I mean, there is nothing. I've talked to so many young marrieds that have gone through the program and said, wow, this is amazing stuff. And a lot of older people said, man, I wish I would have had that as my start to my marriage, or young college kids coming out. If we can get people thinking that direction early, then you're getting an advance thought. So our goal is to try to get it out there before kind of the rubber meets the road on, I'm in a desperate situation. But if we get there, it happens, where people are just, I'm at a crossroads. The goal is first immediately to try to find out if we have resources to get them, their needs, their shelter, their food, that sort of thing. But then immediately get them into a situation where we don't want to have you we're trying to fix the issue that got you there in the first place. Could be a number of things, but let's start talking about it. And the best way that I've gotten people to start that conversation is to start going through that 9-week program.
Oh, that's good.
So it makes it simple. We get on the same page. And then once they go through it once, it's like, oh, hey, let's talk about where your emergency fund is. Do you still have that? And they understand what emergency fund is. And let's talk about where you at with paying down your debts. Because remember, you got to get to that point. Where you at with that? And so it's not like all this overwhelming. It's these little baby steps that you can kind of talk them through.
Right. Oh, that's good. That's really good. So does it go further than just the financial side when you're talking with somebody? I mean, are you obviously taking them through, usually when you look at somebody's checkbook, you can usually tell what their idol is.
Right.
You can see what they spend the most time on and most money on, and it's
Exactly.
usually the thing that's the problem in their life. Do you address those kind of things?
Yeah, and I think that's where it becomes pretty easily identifiable. When you sit down and do a budget and you start doing, let's put your money, figure out where your money's going. It's immediately, you can find out that this is where my idol is, right? Maybe I'm into whatever it is, pick a thing, right? And all my money is drained, but it's going into that thing, right? So let's talk through that. But that then leads into pretty quickly a pointing finger situation. See, I told you shouldn't have been doing that.
Right, exactly.
And then it's, and then you realize, okay, now we're in a different conversation. Now we've got communication to talk through. Before you make that purchase, are you talking through that? But again, all these things lead into some biblical aspect of what we're being taught. So as we go through it, it's pretty quickly identifiable with each person. And the thing that keeps me going, I think, is seeing lives change, right? When you have somebody come to you and say, my marriage is completely different, our finances are completely different, but that's just, a cherry on top of our marriage being completely healthy, where we don't have stresses about I'm going to go buy an outfit because I have a budget for it,
Right.
So that's what keeps me going, is to see people who have a complete turnaround.
That is awesome. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you said you sometimes have people that are in pretty dire situations. I'm just thinking of, my family here, for instance, where I've got 2 kids that are type 1 diabetic, plus a wife who deals with autoimmune things, and you've got medical bills and all types of things like that. Like, what are some advices on things like that where, so much of that is stacked up against you that it seems hard to even get out from underneath it?
Right. Yeah, there's situations, and not everybody, and probably a lot of people aren't making just the in quotes, the bad choices, right? Where it's just, there are tons of medical situations. Now, the good thing is there's plans that can be set up if someone's making X amount of income and you have X amount of outgoing, right, money. There is a breaking point, right? Like I only can bring in so much money. However, if there's a situation where there's an opportunity where somebody says, well, I've got my debts paid off, but my biggest thing right now is my medical bills. If there's an opportunity to find a way to gain more income, right? Maybe that's the second job. That's for a lot of people, thinking about extra work could be exhausting. But the thought is, if I, can go out somewhere and make extra money to try to pay towards, another a bill, and then start working towards that. Finding the right insurance, that's a huge thing that you go through this program, and it teaches you, here's the type of insurances that you should be looking at to help protect you. Some people are in, insurance programs that aren't, fitting to their particular medical needs, right?
That makes sense.
That's a good point.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's really good. So now, are you doing this mostly at church, or do you also do this at work? Are you how are you finding these people? Number one, you've obviously built a name for yourself through this and helping quite a few people. How do people find you most of the time?
Most of the time, it's just by either word of mouth or by the online promotion. So we do it through church. We do it through the Ramsey solutions, once you open a class, you can opt to open it as public. And so anybody can sign up for it. We can host it at, most time we host it at church, but a lot of times it's good to host it, off-site somewhere, at a house or, wherever else is a convenient place for people. It was a big transition prior to the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Everything was, in buildings for the most part. Very rarely did you have something where it was a digital situation. So you had to find someplace local that you could go to. So when we went through this transition over a couple of years of not being able to necessarily meet the way we would have liked to, we had to get into hybrid situations or complete Zoom, which were some of the coolest classes that we've taught, because people were, during the heart of the pandemic, people were away. Like we would see backdrops of people, I'm at the Lake of the Ozarks, Meyer, and they're like, okay, well, I'm over here. I'm, in my, after college, I went back to my parents' house in whatever state they're in. And so it was neat being able to see these different scenarios. At the height of it, I think my goal was in my head, right? This needs to get out to more and more people. I want to see these classes bigger and bigger, not because of, I literally am doing it completely 100% volunteer. I don't make anything off of it. It's literally just a passion of mine.
That's great.
And so my thought is, when you got something that somebody can unwrap and change their life, like, why aren't you in here? Why, and everybody knows somebody. How come, you talk about that sister or that, my daughter doesn't get off her duff and she can't figure out her fight. Send her this class. Like, that's all you got to do. We'll walk through those situations. We'll get the questions going. We'll get them thinking. So, at one point it was getting up to a point where we had multiple people helping out with the classes. There was, churches full of people. Our church had multiple people showing up. But when the pandemic hit, it was like, okay, what are we doing now?
Right.
And so this year was kind of our first real year to try to get fully back into let's just do this, because I try to do it at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. But this was like, let's do this fully in-house. Let's just do our best. And if 5 people show up, then those are the 5 people that we should be in touch with. Let's get back to the heart of, let's go back to that situation. So that's kind of exciting for me, not to think on the grand scale right now, and more these people who are coming are the ones that are, looking for the desire to grow. Right. So
that's good. That's good. So for our audience, I mean, obviously things are getting ready to go to hell in a handbasket. It seems like with the economy and, we flooded the market for the last 2 years. I read an article the other day that said the government put in 40% of all the money that has ever been printed was printed in the last 2 years. Like that to me, that's like taking monopoly money and just throwing it out there and say, hey, this is $100 bill. It's useless. Now we've got inflation. You've got gas prices going off the charts. 5 years ago we were paying $1.69 and now we're paying $6.69. It seems like in some places. What would you say for those who, even before the inflation and what looks to be a soon to be I just went brain dead. What it's called? Recession. Thank you. What would you say people need to do first? Like, what would be the first thing you would say? Hey, you need to prepare for what? What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and people don't like to talk about it, I think, because they consider it a bad word. But it's when people go through it and they actually put this together, it changes their life. It's literally just getting down and sitting down and doing a budget.
Right.
And people are like, I don't want to, that just keeps me from, having fun, or keeps me from, but that the whole point of it is to let you have fun,
Keeps me up. Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, but it also allows you to know, I got to put some money back for
Right.
the rainy day. One of my favorites I always go back to is literally the Three Little Pigs. Like, like we read that book and we're like, well, oh, that's a funny and cute little book, but literally if you think about, the whole path of the Three Little Pigs is just to prepare yourself so that you're not the one when the big bad wolf starts blowing, it's not going to blow your house down,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
You want to be the one who's in, at minimum, the stick house, right?
Right. Yes.
But if you can get in the brick house, then you can help people. Look, he's bringing people in saying, hey dude, I've prepared, come on in, I'll help you out, so I think the simple thing, it was, I got to be honest with you, it was devastating to me when kind of this all started, and when you start seeing like the checks that started coming out to people. I think
Right.
there was a lot of need. I'm not saying that there's not things that people that help people get through things, but the things that I was hearing were, some college kids, high school kids even, who were, running their part-time jobs, and they realized quickly that if I stop my job, I'm going to get $600-700 a week.
Yeah, exactly.
And parents were helping them think through this. Like, why would you if you go to work, you're going to make half that amount. If you don't work, you're going to make twice as much. And this became, for 6 months, a year and a half,
It's
became the
still going on.
mentality
That's
of,
what I mean.
yeah,
People can't find employees. Where'd they go? Like
right,
we didn't have an employee shortage prior to COVID,
right.
and not that many people died. It wasn't like that many people died. Well, let me rephrase it. A lot of people died. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as far as the labor shortage, it wasn't enough to cause that much chaos. So,
Right. But I
what do
think
they
that
do?
mentality is what, when you start getting into the situation where, the government's going to always be there to help me.
Right. Yeah.
You
Exactly.
got to get away from that mentality. You have to get to a point where you're like, I got to protect myself, and be able to share that with others,
Right.
and get to a point where I feel like, if, and we talk about this, if I got to a point where, I were to lose my job, and let's say the job was blessed enough to have some sort of a severance package, that becomes gravy. Like,
Right.
I had 3 to 6 months or more of reserves that was going to prepare me for that chaos that could kick in. I don't have to wait for
Right.
somebody to hand me money, So that mentality is a tough thing to get rid of once you get
Right.
it in there.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. It's just crazy. Like watching what is going on right now. For almost 16 years, I owned my own business, and it was really successful. I enjoyed it, but God called me out of that into full-time ministry. And I know enough about business to know that we cannot continue to sustain the way that we're going. Eventually, people run out of a need for stuff. I mean, we're based on a consumerism economy, and eventually there's stuff that you just don't need, and especially when you look at what in the age groups right now. I think it was the millennial generation is one of the least numbers of generation, the least amount of people in that generation. You got the baby boomers, which was the largest of any generation in the United States, which are now all dying off, and as well as retiring. And so that kills, the labor force as well. So now you've got this younger generation that's not motivated to work and hoping they become TikTok rich, and aren't really motivated in making a living out there. Eventually it just seems like things have got to stop or slow down extremely fast, and that's going to cause havoc.
Yeah, because when you have things like, shortages, like we talked before we jumped on live that I have a grandbaby. It's our first grandbaby, and she's 8 months old.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But to look into my daughter's eyes when they're going through a formula shortage, like, what is that? Like, what? How do
Yeah.
you? So we started like Googling, like, well, what do you do to make sure your baby has and you start reading all these old recipes from the 1950s that they used to, whatever,
Right.
boil rice and do all, all this stuff. You're like, are we really like, what's happening?
Yeah,
Like,
it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
so
I think
then,
most people won't make it if they have to figure out how to start a fire and shoot a squirrel. Like
right.
there's going to be a lot of people, struggling at that point in time. Or to even grow. I grew up on a farm. I mean, at least I know how to grow something. I'll have to
Right.
go steal it if it does go as bad, as bad as it looks like it's going to get. But we serve a sovereign God who, I'm writing a paper for one of my seminary classes right now. And it's on the Deuteronomic cycle, and it's the cycle that the Israelites go through quite often, all through the Old Testament, and we go through it personally as well. And you can see through church history when it goes through this, and really what the cycle is at the top. The Israelites are praising God and worshiping God and loving God, and there's peace in their land. And then the moment comes where they no longer honor God or obey God. They go into idolatry. And then God punishes them into slavery in most of the cases of the Old Testament. And then they realize they screwed up. They repent. God brings them back. And what I was writing about, or what I am writing about, is that God is long-suffering. When you and I are reading the Old Testament, we go from page to page to page, which feels like a day, which in essence is really hundreds of thousands of years before God actually spanks them and, puts them into slavery. It's this cycle that we've been blessed for 250 years as a nation. And if you look at our society right now, it is full of idolatry. It couldn't be any worse as far as the idolatry goes, whether it's the almighty dollar or whether it's our Republicans or Democrats or straight, gay, trans, whatever we're elevating above God, iPhones, the church building, whatever you want to pick and choose, we have become an idolatrous and an adulterous nation that God is eventually going to have to correct. And we may or may not be in that now. We won't know until history is over in most cases. But it feels like we're at a place now where God has to do something. And I think he is doing some stuff in and through our Supreme Court. We saw some great things this past week. I don't think we can stave off the financial problems that are going to come, but I think, sometimes in trials and tribulations, we draw closer to God, and hopefully that is something that we'll see here. I know a lot of times, you're dealing and discipling. I disciple men and women all the time, couples, and it's usually in their despair is when they're looking for help. Financially, I can see where that's a big deal for you, because a lot of people go through financial issues and they need help. And I just appreciate what you're doing and how you're coming alongside of them to give them guidance and direction, because not everybody, that's one thing they don't teach in school anymore. How to,
Right.
how to balance a checkbook, how to make a budget.
It's like personal finance.
Yeah.
I remember taking those classes in high school and college, and you don't see those anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
And how to stave off, in the church, we need to be teaching, how not to envy. The reason you go broke a lot of times is because you're envious. You need the new iPhone. Well, the new iPhone's no different than the last iPhone that you had, except it's newer and about $500 more.
Right.
Or the car or the house or, all of those kind of things. And so people really need to be looking at what is important.
Yep.
When I was making a lot of money, and when I was utilizing that money, and Satan was utilizing that money to keep my eyes off God. But the moment that the scales came off and I gave my life to the Lord, and I realized that, there are days I wish I had money. I was just telling somebody today that I'm hoping one of these days I get a raise that'll take me from McDonald's to St. Louis Bread Co. I can quit eating at McDonald's and go to St. Louis Bread Co. But I no longer, back in the day when I had two things, really major sins in my life. One of them was worry, and one of them was money. I was always worried about my money. And, my company, I sold big ticket items. And they would be anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 ticket items. And so not only was I selling this, but I was also having to pay for it. So I would sell it to a customer. We'd get a deposit. I'd pay I'd send a $150,000 to $200,000 check over here, and I'd get a check here, and then I'd have to ship stuff out and wait for a check. And like this shuffle game that I'd been playing for almost 18 years just took a toll on me. And, there was a moment in 2018 where I knew God was calling me into full-time ministry. We'd started a church in 2015, and I knew there was a point in time in 2018 where I owed nobody any money and nobody owed me any money, and I thought, this is the perfect time to pull the plug. And I literally pulled the plug, went into full-time ministry it wasn't like I banked a whole lot of money either. I didn't bank anything. I just banked on God was going to take care of me. And the cool thing since 2018 is that God has provided every single time. I sleep good. I don't worry. I don't fear. I don't, I still work at the church. I still do construction on the side. I'm a handyman kind of deal. And God has provided for everything that we've ever needed. And I literally, when I go to bed at night, man, I am content. I am really content. And I think that's a key for the church. That's a key for people in the church, that you've got to learn to be content where you are, and not
100%.
always looking forward and trying to get somewhere that's just going to keep you up at night. I'm not saying if you're blessed and you know how to manage your money and God is doing some great things and you're taking care of what is God's, and you're able to add to your own, man, that's a great blessing. There are very few people that are like that, but learn to be content where you are, and I promise you'll sleep good at night.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that contentment is the key. Obviously that's the reason that Ramsey, calls theirs financial peace, because it does give you that piece. And I think that's the one thing that people don't realize until they go through it, is what they're being robbed of, right? Like the opportunity, like you said, if you're in, some sort of massive debt, I mean, in Proverbs, states that that the borrower is slave to the lender.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
you can do nothing that you want to do or what God's calling you to do if you have all this massive amount of bills and debts
Right.
that you have. You can't step away to go, either part-time ministry, or, if it's going on a mission trip that you want to go on, you're stuck. You got 2-3 jobs, to keep yourself out of that. And that's what the enemy wants. He does not want people to just be free to go help people where they need to.
Right. I was just talking to a guy last night who's he runs a mission organization that does a lot of stuff in India, not Indiana, India. And he and I were talking, and he's really the organizer of the program. He doesn't necessarily go to India very often. I think every other year he goes, and he was just talking about all the people that are, just lining up and wanting to go and take care of these orphans and these widows that are in India. And because there's 400 million children in India, is what he told me. That just blew me away. That's more than the people in the United States. Yeah. So the population is massive when it comes to children. And not saying that those are all orphans, but it's a very big population to deal with when it comes to children. We were talking about all the people that were lined up ready to go. They had no debt. They had finances to where they could go and spend a year or two there. Their spouse, male or female, was, and I don't mean combined. One of them was called, the male was called, the female felt like she was called as well, or the female was called and the male felt like he was called as well. And, there's a passage in the Bible where Paul talks about, don't get married if you can't, handle the flesh, because it will hinder you from doing God's work. It'll hinder you because it really does. The moment that you get married and you have kids, it hinders you from actually stepping out of that. Your finances will do the exact same thing. I love what you said, that you will not step into a calling a lot of times. And I see this all the time with people. They will literally weigh, the pluses and the minuses. God says, I want you to go do something. Then they go, well, let me see if this works financially. Let me see if this works in my timeline. I'll have to quit my job. Like, they're negotiating with God, and they're missing major blessings by not stepping into their ministry.
Well, and I can be honest, I've missed a few, weekends here because of having even just some of those same thoughts myself, just with gas being as expensive it is and like driving out here and stuff. And my wife finally, it was kind of funny today. She goes, "Are you going tonight?" And I'm like, I'm not sure. And she goes, "Well, you started this at the beginning because you felt like God wanted you there. So get your butt off of the couch and go." And I was like, "Okay." Point taken. So he's like, "Don't you think God's going to provide for you if you go and, we'll have enough money for gas and stuff?" And I was like, okay, point taken, but sometimes it takes that, other person telling you that, because you get kind of stuck in that rut. So
yeah, exactly. It's a fear factor. A lot of times we fear the unknown. We fear what we can't control. And in the last 17 years of ministry, I literally have watched God provide in moments where I thought, this is my last meal. This is the last time I'm sleeping in this house. This is the last time I'm driving this car. And God comes in and shows up and shows off. And I wish the church would get to a place to where we relied on God like that, both with our money, that we allowed him to be stewards of our money, of our soul, of our children, of our spouse. Let him take over. And I'm telling you what, it's a much better deal when you do.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's, I think that's the unfortunate stigma that people have placed against, what the church talks about with tithing. And, as a pastor, I'm sure, you're probably in the same thought process that, look, God he doesn't need your money to build his church. Yeah. He's wanting to know where you stand. Yes. And he wants to have that relationship with you. And if you're going to have the bigger relationship with money, by allowing yourself to even tithe the 10%, whether it's net, gross, whatever that decision is within that person's, the bottom line is, are you willing to do that to know that I'm going to provide for you?
Right.
And the amount of relationship that comes out of that, is amazing. And so, I think that's, you hear, people all the time, still hear today, oh, this church always talks about money. That's all they're wanting is your money. Mm-hmm. And really, God doesn't need that. He can snap his fingers and do whatever he wants. He wants you,
Exactly. Yeah. That's, I was like that. I hadn't been in a church. I was an atheist prior to giving my life to the Lord in 2003. And, I maybe went to church 3 times since I was 12 years old till I was 33. And the 3 times that I went, it was money. Like, literally, I was like, yes, see, that's exactly what that's why I'm not going to church, because they want my money, because it was my money. And, that's how I looked at it. But I'll never forget the day that I gave my life to the Lord, and about, probably less than a year later, I owned 10 condos, 2 houses, and the house that I was living in. All the other stuff was rental property. And that was where I was taking God, put him on the pedestal, and I worship him, and I have a great time, and thank you, Jesus. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, back to my money. And I just kept going back and forth. And finally, in a weird of events, I mean, if I told you financially how this happened, you'd be like, what? Seriously, how'd you do that? You screwed that one up royally. And yes, I screwed it up royally, but it was with God's help. And I lost it all, lost every bit of it. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on my knees, and I was was praying to God, and I was like, literally, I was like, dude, I just gave my life to you, and I'm thinking, he got a good deal when he got me, and I should have double of everything that I had now. That was my thought process. And I remember just praying, and I was praying. I was like, why? Like, I need to know why this is happening to me, because of all the things in my life, money was near and dear to me. And I'll never forget, it's just like us sitting here talking. He said, I never gave that to you to begin with. The enemy gave that to you. And so everything that I'm going to do from here on out, you will know that it's from me. You will see that it's from me, and you will honor, worship, and respect me because of what I'm doing in your life. And I relinquished control that day forward. And it was just like, okay, you do whatever you got to do. And it wasn't a few months later, I lost my corporate job. I had $1,500 in a laptop computer. I started my company. Within 3 years, it was a almost a $4 million company. And it just kind of blew up from there, and God was just blessing it. And through, through a series of events that happened in my life, my wife got cancer. We started a church, things just finally overtook my desire to run a company and make money. And my desire was to be into ministry, and he just put it at a spot where I could just close the doors and walk away. I say all that to say is that you will go through seasons, especially if money is your God, and little g God, because it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to bring you happiness. It is a tool that you need to have in order to live, in order to sometimes have nice things. But God will provide the things that you need, not necessarily the things that you want. If you're driving a $50,000 car or a $100,000 car and you're getting ready to lose it, that's not something that you need. He may let you lose it, so don't blame it on him. There are a lot of things in your life that you don't necessarily need that he may sift out. But once you realize and the smoke clears, you'll be happier for it, I promise, if you learn to be content. Most of our problems in Christianity are not because the enemy's coming after us, because we make stupid decisions and stupid mistakes. You can look at almost every financial issue that somebody has. It's usually dumb purchases or too much purchases, or you're spending more than you have, or sometimes you get into situations like you're in, Rusty, just medical expenses just overtake you, and there's not a lot that you can do about it.
Yep.
Sometimes those things happen, but you've got to realize that God has a plan, and that he will take care of you in the end. And it won't be all, peaches and cream while you're on this side of heaven. And
that's true.
It's that's never promised. The health, wealth, and prosperity is not a promise by any means. Good stewardship, there's a good premises and good promises behind that as well. So Jeff, you're in the corporate world, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you tread waters in the corporate world? Do you do matter of fact, I think we were talking, you do a Bible study at work, is that correct? Or with work people? Or okay.
We do, yeah. Taking a snapshot of where we are, right now is we do a weekly, we call it a faith group, and we get together, do a devotion. We do a prayer. We do at the beginning. It's a half hour. We keep it fairly structured so that, because people are in the middle of their work days when we're doing it, it's considered around noon, around their lunchtime.
Right.
So today snapshot is, yes, we're meeting to essentially, the beginning is to give thanks to God, talk about some yay gods and some celebrations going on in people's lives. We're kind of living in it, in a opportunity to grow together. We work together. For a lot of these people, we work very closely. Sometimes we're doing our jobs more hours in a week than we're even home, seeing our families.
Right.
So having a good relationship, and then we do a devotion, and then at the end we have an opportunity for prayer requests and follow-ups, and to be able to pray with each other.
So what was that like, starting that? Like, especially in the corporate world? I haven't been in the corporate world in 20 plus years. So I kind of do what I want, sometimes. And matter of fact, I actually I'll go to some corporations and do a Bible study just to see if I can, raise somebody's hair on the back of their neck. But, how is that, with you? Do you have a culture in the corporation that, pat you on the back for it, opens it up for you, is restricted, or what's that culture like?
So I think it's pretty common in most, I work for a global company. And so I think for most companies, they're sensitive to diversity and things that are, going on. And so throughout my tenure, at this company, at the beginning of my tenure, when I was in my passion stage where I wanted to go share about everything, I don't know that I definitely didn't see it in writing, but I had this feeling that it wasn't this isn't the place you talk about God. It just isn't. There's lots of other things you can talk about, but you don't do it. It's just kind of an unsaid rule in people's minds. And I'll just jotted down some notes for timelines because it's been a while. But so what's funny is there's, a lot of companies have some kind of an internal communication site or place where you can post some things, like you would, just to kind of, hey, what's going on in the company, and, sharing some thoughts, and they're monitored pretty closely most of the time. Someone had posted back in 2015, are there any, very openly and honestly and quick, are there any faith groups here, and it caught my eye, and I'm like, oh, somebody else, one other person, this whole company's thinking like I'm thinking. Like, what? And so I watched the conversations, just to see. I kind of pinged out there, hey, I'm interested as well. What's, let me know what you find out. And some other people did as well. And immediately a monitor, a person or a system that was monitoring it, indicated that this is going to be removed. You can't talk about this type of communication on our public, in our forums, for the company. And this person questioned back and forth a little bit, and they eventually removed it. So I reached out to her separately and said, hey, I'm still interested. Like, what? Now that we kind of know each other a little bit, very lightly, you interested in kind of talking more? And she said, yeah, we know that there's other people like us out there, there's at least two, and now there appears to be, there's maybe a handful of people. Okay. So we all, just got together in the lunchroom, and we worked in the same building in the cafeteria, and we started talking. We're like, what's this about? You guys have a similar thought process, and there's, and so the thought is, let's semi-organize something. We're not doing anything to break the rules. Let's just kind of, hang out in the lunchroom. Can have lunch together and talk about stuff. Yeah. So that became our meeting place. So that was the beginning back in 2015. And from there, it just started to grow. Like, people started to hear, you hear stories, like, what's going on there? You're going to lunch and talking about faith. How come I can't go? And they're like, oh no, you can go. And next thing you know, the table's growing, and so we finally got to a point where we said, we need to move this like off to a bigger space, and it was nothing that was posted, because was indicated that that's not allowed, which is fine. It's just literally word of mouth. And so as we started growing into this atmosphere, realizing there's a lot more people than just, a handful that, want to talk about the faith, and while they're with their coworkers, right? But more, we're finding that people need it. Like, this is the middle of their work week. They're probably going through some tough stuff at home. Now you're getting on these stressful conference calls, or dealing with clients, whatever the case may be. And this break is like, I mean, it's like a weight lifted off. Like, and you hear people saying, I needed that this week, can't wait to see you next week, and they're going back to their workspaces and are coming back saying I was much more productive when I got back on my next calls. Like I was fired up, wanting to get things done. Like, so now you're going from, we just want to talk about things to becoming a more productive employee for your company. Like, okay, so this is another, thought that we're
it almost sounds like the Daniel plan.
Yeah. Right.
Daniel said, hey, just give me 10 days. I promise you we'll look better than everybody else. And, we're not going to eat the choice meats and we're not going to do that. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and Christians should stand out like that. If you're claiming to be a Christian in the business world, man, you've got to stand out. You've got to be different, because I ask this question a lot of times. I do a lot of seminars and conferences, and I ask this question all the time. If people were to need a prayer or help in some moral or biblically way, would they know to come to you?
Right.
At work. Would they know that you're not the guy sitting over the water cooler telling the dirty jokes, or, staring down the secretary or a coworker that's walking by? Would you be the person that, is doing the right things on their expense report and different things like that? Like, that's what Christians need to be in the workforce. And too many hypocrites in the church, outside the church, I should say, that come in, raising holy hands on Sunday and then raising holy hell on Monday, just give a bad name to Christianity in general. And so we should be those people that are easily spotted and great productivity. What a great, that would be awesome. I wish your company would have watched it intently just to see what happens, to see maybe that productivity. And, because statistics show that for couples who are, for an example, that are engaged in church and that go regularly, are like 75 or 80 times more likely to stay together for their whole life. They're happier. Their kids are more well-adjusted, so forth and so on. So those who are true Christians, those who are, and I say true Christians, but are on-fire Christians, need to look different, and the world needs to see them. But unfortunately, what happens at work and, even in your neighborhood, is that people look at the lukewarm person and go, well, the only difference between them and me is that they go to church every Sunday. I'm morally good. I don't beat my wife. I take care of my kids. I pay my taxes. I do my bill. All of that kind of stuff, and yet they don't see that on fire Christian. And so, that's very honorable that you would set and do that. I love that.
Well, what's interesting is, and that's kind of a good transition in that thought, is we thought the same. Like people need to, exactly. We thought people need to see this. Like this is, why don't we? And so you're familiar with the See You at the Pole, right? Where, kids, get together in their schools. Well, we were talking one day at a meeting. We're like, well, we got a flagpole out the front of our building. Great. Like, can we meet and do that? Like, it's a flagpole. Like, why?
Right, exactly.
Public space. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, let's go meet out there. And, those who want to go, we encourage people, like, take off with your kids and be with your kids at your schools. But if you're here at work on this day, we're going to meet out just with the other kids, and we're just going to pray for our company, pray for our country.
Right.
And about 50 people showed up around the pole, and we were like, oh,
praise God.
Okay, awesome. Wow, that's pretty cool. And then people were like, what are you guys doing? Like, what's happening here?
That's awesome.
So we were like, oh, well, people are interested. So we were like just helping people get information. Here's when we meet. And it got to a point where it was like, we don't want like a leader of this group, right? This is a group of people. And so what happened quickly was we started breaking off into a little more organized thought of, let's have some people bring some devotions, right? Let's have, so they're hearing other voices. It's not like, oh, this is this person's group that meets. It's a group of people who meet at this corporation, And so so what happened was the next see you at the pole event came. And by this time, we started, we got through Christmas, and we started, adopting Christmas families, and started becoming this thing. We're like, this is an all-in thing. Like, we're excited, we're passionate. Started growing more. We had our second See with the pole event, and we were like, worked out pretty good last year. Let's do it again this year. Well, we got there, and there was about 100 people who were ready to be at the See with the pole, and we're like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, God's really making this thing move. Well, the pole sits outside of the president's office, and so there was quickly an indication that you can't do this. And we're like, well, what do you mean? Like, and they said, we'll meet later, type thing, disperse.
Wow.
We're like, okay. Like, I mean, we're not here to break any rules. Like, if that's a rule, And so there was some people who were called, into the president's office, along with the human resources. And they were asking, what's happening. And we just bluntly, explain, this is our path. This is what's happening. And they said, well, you need to stop.
Oh, wow.
And we said, what do you mean? Like, well, they said, you can't meet in groups where you're talking about religion and politics, right? Other things you can talk about, but those two things, we're like, okay, well, we definitely don't want to break any rules, right? So if that's in policy, if you can just shoot us over the policy, we'll forward it out to everybody, and then we'll let them know this is policy. We've got to figure out another game plan. And they said, well, it's there. And we said, no, I believe you. You're an HR, person. Like, just, shoot it over to us so that we know, so we can see where it's at and how, because if you can't meet with 3 people, whatever it is, we want to stay within the guidelines. And we went on our way, and they said, yeah, we'll get you the information. We didn't hear, so we followed back up, and it never got sent to us. Literally, the idea, I think, unless there was just a miscommunication between the things we were supposed to see, was just kind of, let's put this to rest. And so what we asked them was, well, what can we do? And they said, well, one thing, you can meet whatever you want to do off site, right? You can go meet at the restaurant across the street or whatever. We can't keep you from doing that, but you just can't do it. And we're like, okay. And they said, or whatever happens behind closed doors, no one ever knows about, right? And so we're saying, okay, does that mean, what do you mean? And they're like, we're just saying that if there's a conference room reserved and there's a meeting going on, no one really knows. Now, if something comes out of that meeting that someone's offended about, and it gets bubbled up, then we have a problem, right? And so that spooked a lot of people, right? Because they were like, oh, now we might, people were thinking we might lose their jobs, and all this sort of thing. And so in talking through it, the group had decided, let's just continue meeting on our own. We're not here to ruffle feathers. That's not the point. The point is, we want to meet, right?
Right.
So that was an interesting turn of events. And then fast forward to 2016, 17, there was a meeting at one of our other locations. We have multiple locations around the U.S. There was a business meeting that was happening, and someone got wind that, hey, this site is doing a faith meeting. Can we do it here? And so through a turn of events, they started. Now we have 2 sessions of people in different buildings that are meeting as faith groups, and on their own terms, right? They're not breaking any rules according to what has been disclosed. But now we can see, kind of, for us, a lot of this was around, we don't want to necessarily push. We're not here to ruffle feathers and push anything. We're here to be an opportunity to pray. The cool thing is, we pray for our leaders. Like, that's one of the big things is to pray for our leaders of our company,
Right.
you know, to pray for the leaders of our country, to do the things that we feel like we're called to do. And it's not necessarily to say, well, how come you got this doing this and we can't do that? So that's where we essentially landed today.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man. Well, that's
cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love the boldness, you know, that, and you're still being respectful. You know, I think you see that all through Scripture where Jesus is, you know, he's going at the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and you know, every time the politics would come up, or the you know, the ruler, the king, whatever, he would always be very respectful in those cases. And you know, sometimes you have to, you know, you got to play the game in order to continue to do it. It's more important that you guys are able to continue to do as much as you possibly can without, you know, flipping over the table, so to speak.
Yeah, and what we've always said in these meetings is that God doesn't necessarily need our company, right? He's not like, oh, thank me that I, you know, that we have this company who does this thing. I really need them. Without them, the world wouldn't be what it is, you know?
Right, exactly.
He has a company of people, and people are there to connect, and he's put them in places for reasons, you know? So to keep the thought that, you know, that each company is, you know, is needed for the reason you think it's needed, may not be God's design or direction.
Right, exactly.
Right?
That's good. Well, man, that is awesome. So, what are your future plans? You guys got any big plans? Just kind of status quo, or
I think from what I've gathered from everybody, it's pretty status quo. One other thing that was interesting that kind of made us think. So during the pandemic, right? So everything went digital.
Right.
And so now everybody's meeting on Zoom, which that was, you know, just like everybody, that was this trial and error thing. Like, what are we going to do now? Now we can't meet. So Zoom came up. Well, somewhere around Christmas time, again, one of these things came out through a public forum, and it said there's a Christmas concert that's going to be, and it was dedicated around the company. And we were like, well, that's interesting, because nobody ever uses the word Christmas. You know, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
So we're like, so everybody started, you know, asking about it. And it turns out that this was in the United Kingdom, right? Because it's a global company. And so we're like, okay, well, maybe we'll join. And we asked, and they were like, you know, absolutely. And it turned out to be, when we went into the Zoom session, that there were people from all over the world on this doing the same thing.
Wow.
There was executives, right? High executives, managing directors and executives on this call, and they were quoting Bible verses. And we were like, wait a minute, well, this is interesting, you know, like what? So when it all ended, we got with the people who organized it, and we're like, hey, here's who we are. And they're like, whoa, we didn't even know that existed in the US. And we're like, well, we didn't know you existed there, you know? So again, there's more people who are thinking about this whole God thing than just us. That's weird. And so when we got with them, at the end of the call, was just kind of an interesting conversation. They said, we have no problems in the UK, in England. Matter of fact, we have Christian groups, talks about Jesus, and it's open, completely open. You can do anything you want. And if somebody wants to have, you know, a Hindu group, that's perfectly fine too. You know, it's not like there's a status around it. And we said, well, can we kind of jump into yours? And because since you've already, you know, got everything, and they said, it's not the same in the US. That in the US, there's a stigma, and a corporate stigma around it. And there's a feeling of anxiousness, I guess, with companies in the US to allow.
Yeah, everybody's so worried about being canceled, and with the cancel culture and the wokeness and all that kind of stuff, man, everybody's afraid to step up and be bold. and
Right.
stand firm on something that they actually believe on, or believe
Right.
in, I should say.
Right.
Well, God bless you, man. That is awesome. I'm proud that you guys are doing that. In the world that is, especially when it's talking about the almighty dollar and, big business and they just don't want to step out. I do believe we're seeing a shift though. And I think you're going to see a shift in all of this wokeness. You look at all the stuff that's happening with Disney right now. Once you start hitting a company with their pocketbook or at their pocketbook, they're gonna switch gears real quick. And hopefully we'll see that because I think people are tired of some of the craziness that's going on, the way that's being inundated on kids, the way that just everybody is just you can't even have a conversation anymore. And people can't disagree without hating each other. And that's all social media. I mean, and that's the corrupt media that's behind all that stuff. So, well, man, we will be praying for you as you continue, in that corporate world of just trying to be the light and the salt of the earth. To be there for other believers. And I hope you guys continue to stand firm and do the right thing. So, if you have in a couple of minutes, I should say in 1 or 2 minutes, what would you tell people, let's go back to finances. What would you tell people to prepare for in the upcoming months? You said something earlier just about like saving some money, but what would be some good helps for the people as we finish up here?
Yeah, when you're looking at things now, like the inflation, I don't know if you guys have gone grocery shopping in the last couple of weeks, but I mean, I mean, we don't even get nearly the amount of food in a cart, right?
Right.
Then you're well over your, it's 30-40% increase
Right.
in the things that you would normally buy. Just you don't have to get anything fancy,
Right.
and it's a huge amount. When you take somebody who's, at the point of living, at their, just check to check, literally, right? That they haven't had an opportunity or haven't taken the chance to save back, some funds and prepare. This is where you're caught in dire straits, right? And the best thing that I would encourage people to do is it's never, ever, ever too late, right?
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere. And so, go to I would recommend some sort of a faith-based program around it, because you're going to find people who want to sell you products and different things. That's not good.
Yes,
in a lot of cases. Go to a faith-based program. Go to your church and ask. Go to if interested in Dave Ramsey's, go to Dave Ramsey. They've got tons of resources out there. But just start somewhere. And if nothing else, if you're like, it just seems so overwhelming to me to even begin, sign up for one of those classes. It's a 9-week course, and it takes you through all the basics of everything to get you started. So there's no stopping what's going to happen with you. Can't necessarily today stand up and say, well, we're going to stop inflation. It's going to be what it is. And we just have to be prepared. Right.
Or you could just bury your head in the sand like the administration's doing, saying it's not inflation yet. They're like, well, yeah, whatever. They haven't gone to Walmart like I have. You were talking about going up 30 or 40%, but have you seen the sizes of everything?
Right.
Same price, smaller package.
Shrinking.
Like everything is shrinking. Like I was just like, you got to be kidding me. My wife paid the same for like a jar of mayonnaise that she did, 6 weeks ago, and yet the jar's half the size.
Right.
Exact same SKU number, because I think she did it online, and it comes in a different size. Like, golly, just crazy. So, well, Jeff, brother, I appreciate you taking your time tonight. Sorry about all the confusion earlier with the technical difficulties. And
can I say one more quick thing?
Yes, sir. Sure,
it's just real simple. Is if you're in a corporation, right, and you feel like I can't do this or I can't talk about it, doesn't have to be anything big. Grab somebody that around your company and just say, hey, let's go, take a walk, or let's meet for lunch. And To watch God work through that and to watch that grow in your company is amazing. And you don't have to have all the right answers. It's a very
Right.
simple process that you can just start with somebody, and then if that person knows somebody, let God kind of work through people and connect it.
Amen.
But I think corporations need this more than ever, and it's free.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I always tell people, if you're reading your Bible, you have discipleship material. All you
Right.
have to do is talk about what you're reading. Like,
Right.
it's pretty simple. You don't have to have a book or a big study or anything. Just talk about the few chapters or verses that you read during the morning, and then you got something to chew on throughout the day. So great advice, Jeff, man. I'll be praying for you, and
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, hope to meet you someday in person, and we'll be praying for you and your ventures.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Well, guys, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We are going to call it a night, and we will see you back here next Monday night. God bless.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.